We're going to start in a few minutes. There's still a lot of people arriving. So over to you, Graham.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good evening. Graham Pilkington. I'm the regional coach lead for England Athletics up in the north, looking after sprints and hurdles. Thank you very much, Martin. As Martin said, today's very much a introduction to plyometrics. There is a huge amount of information which I've gathered together to pull together for this presentation. Thanks to Mike Leonard and Martin also for sending over information to add into that, and a few other people. Shani sent some stuff over as well to put into that. So if you're good people and you stay to the end, I will give you my email address, and if you email me at the end, I will pull that together in a Dropbox or WeTransfer, and I'll get that information over to you. There's quite a lot of files, and if it's something you want to read in a bit more detail, there's a huge amount of information there which I can drop through into you. We are going to have gaps in between the presentation for questions, so rather than me try and look at the questions that are popping up on the right hand side of the screen all the way through, it's easier, I found, just to do the presentation and then have a break every so often, and Martin will stream some of the questions for us to ask as we go through, or for me to answer as we go through. If I can't, I will try and get that information to you and come back to you separately, but hopefully be able to answer most of the questions based on what we have. If we get started, I think there's one or two people still coming in, I can see, but we'll probably get started and let them catch up. So, introduction to plyometrics, very top level stuff. This really looking at a number of factors. We won't be discussing that, you'll be glad to know. I will be discussing why we won't be discussing that later, but if you read a lot of the American stuff, plyometrics is a total different thing than a lot of the stuff that's coming out from athletics, both from America and across the world. So if you Google plyometrics, you will come up with all sorts of stuff that doesn't really apply to athletics and isn't really plyometric, but we'll examine that as we go through. But what we will be looking at is, what are plyometrics? How do you introduce plyometrics to your athletes? What are the dangers and pitfalls? How do you progress and regress the training programs? When you do this, I'm going to give you some exercise ideas. I can't give you every exercise idea under the sun. There's just not the time to present on that. But what we will be doing is having a look at a few examples, just to give you an idea of some of the sort of things, mainly that I do with my athletes. And as I said, if you're good, I will pull together the further resources and send those across to you. And there's a lot of good stuff in there, so please bear with us to the end. Unfortunately for the exercises, my plyometric boxes are locked away in a store cupboard at the track, and I've not been able to get access to them, so I've had to pull up some other videos and drop those in. I've not been able to do everything I would like to do and video everything I'd like to do, but I've brought some of the stuff. I've got some of the athletes to do some of the exercises and tried to drop in a few other videos that I've got from other places. So, what are plyometrics? It's nothing new. It appeared in training literature in the late 1960s. It came out of the Russian training system, and probably the first athlete that people started looking at about why he was improving so much and where it's coming from was Valery Bortsov. People started examining his training programs, looking at what he was doing, and at that stage he was doing quite a lot of sort of plyometric type based exercises, which people have taken, tried to adapt, looked at why it works, how it works, and there's probably a lot more science on that coming out now than there has been for some time. But to be perfectly honest, having done quite a bit of research on the back of this, there's a lot of old stuff out there that still applies, and not very much new stuff that's probably been brought up to date with nice pretty pictures, etc. So if there's a book to be written, I think it's probably on plyometrics at the moment. So if anybody fancies joining myself and Martin and Shani, I'm sure we can pull together a book on it. It derives from the Latin word pletheion, plyo meaning more and metric meaning measure. So more measure. And the American coach Fred Wiltz was credited with being the first Westerner to use that term in about 1975, but it has been used in training programs since the late 60s by the Russians, as I said. The goal of plyometrics, it's a form of strength and resistance training. It's designed to simulate the load imparted on the muscle during exercise. It's therefore best done with movement specific to the actual athletic event, whether that's sprinting, hurdling, throwing. There's all kinds of plyos that you can do that replicate the actual specific event. But obviously, from my point of view today, we're mainly going to look at sprinting with some hurdling dropped in. So designed to make the muscle respond with strength. And the main thing that differentiates from the photo I showed you earlier is it's got to be as quickly as possible. The contacts are very, very quick. A sprinting contact at top end speed at maximum velocity is about 0.08 of a second. So those contacts are massive. You can't replicate that in the weights room. It has to be replicated in other ways. And what we'll look at is why you do it, what the gains are, what the reasons are, and hopefully what your athletes might get out of it. It's basically a link between strength and speed of movement. You do need strength, but it's the speed of movement element that is absolutely paramount for the plyometrics. The goal again, specific work for enhancement of explosive power, creating the highest possible force in the shortest amount of time. Something I talk to my athletes a lot about is force production and contact times and how they produce force and directions of force, what they're looking at, how they're looking at it. And really on that, you know, we're looking at massive force production over a really, really short amount of time. And we really need to train the athletes in order to prepare them to do that. Training plyometrics enhances the tolerance of the muscle for increased stretch loads. The stretch shortening cycle, that's something we will have a look at. And trains the stretch receptors, the muscle spindles, which again, I'll have a look at in the next couple of slides. The stretch shortening action explained. I always try and explain to my athletes what we're doing and why we're doing it. I don't just expect them to just do something without understanding. So even from joining the group, I always try and get them to buy into what we do and why we do it. Over the period of closure, I've been sending them quite long. We've been introducing some new stuff. I'll talk about that at the end. And I've been sending them articles, information, presentations, various other things for them to look at and understand about what we do. So I always try and get them to understand movement. So the way we look at the stretch shortening action is I get them just simply to use a finger and put the finger there and just move it as quickly as they can. And then I talk to them about stretching the tendons, the muscles, the ligaments, and then try to get the finger back quickly and just get them to feel how much quicker that finger will move. And then we discuss why that is, what's actually being stretched. And we talk about tendons being stretched, muscles being stretched, what can hold the most tension. We talk about tendons, you know, that run basically from here all the way down to the end of the finger. If you chop it, chop your finger just behind the front and chop one of the tendons, it disappears right up here. It's a really, really tight elastic thing that attaches up to the bicep and works all the way through. So we really talk about why things are, how things are, and what force you can apply to them, how those forces apply. I talk to little things. I've actually been out today, you'll be glad to know, and bought a pack of elastic bands especially. We talk about sort of a longer, looser elastic bands being more flexible, having to stretch them a lot further before you can create force. And then we talk about sort of smaller, tighter elastic bands, not being able to stretch very far, but actually when you let them go, they spring back really quickly compared to longer, less elastic bands. We discuss, as I said, the loading, we discuss the tendons and muscles, and I try and relate those really, really simply. And, you know, I'm no sports scientist. I have a couple of athletes, one who is just started his, or about to start his second year, but and they're actually teaching me quite a lot now. So training the stretch receptors, again, something we talk about. In simple terms, the stretch receptors act like a spindle. When the muscle extends, the brain sort of realizes actually this has gone too far, and what it does is it tries and contracts the muscles back. I talk about it being a spindle. Actually, it's not a spindle. And the way we demonstrate it is get them to throw their arm back and see what happens. And what happens is the arm will automatically come back. It does that because, and I just explain, you have receptors at the end of the muscles that suddenly contract, and the central nervous system sends a message to the brain, and it suddenly then says, actually, this is going to hurt you, so it contracts to stop that pain. But in reality, it's separate fibers within the muscle, and this is as detailed as I'm going to get today, called intrafusal fibers, and those being stretched send a message to the central nervous system that they should contract back and pull them in. That's something we can actually use if we tee it up right, to actually get some better benefit when the athletes are sprinting, and it's something you're partly training in your plyometric training. So again, we'll have a look at that, how we set up the athletes, how we actually set up those muscles to fire, and for the central nervous system to react and pull them back in. So we'll have a look at that as we go through. If you need to convince your athletes on the benefits of plyometrics and why it works, just get them to try this. Stand next to a wall and double foot action, jump as high as they can. Then get them to take a step back, step into it, and as fast as he can go into a double foot jump. They'll finally go a lot higher, and that allows you then to explain that it's basically allows the insect. Again, we'll look at these words and try and debunk some of the myths of them. The eccentric contraction, where you're sort of coming down and loading up the muscle. So the stretch action primes a concentric one, which allows them to explode out again to provide more power. Again, analogy of the elastic band, it's a bit like getting the elastic band, loading it so that it can ping back up and create that power out. Eccentric, concentric movements, put simply, eccentric is the strengthening or lengthening phase. So that is the eccentric phase where something is stretching. If you do your whole hand and think of that as being the foot and the ankle joint, it's that action where it's stretching and loading. And the concentric is where that suddenly shortens and comes back out. That's it. If you think of those two movements wrapped around everything, you'll very much start to get everything, get everything teed up and ready around that. Right, very briefly, any questions just to start on that? I don't know whether this early stage there's been any questions. If not, we will crack on with it. Should you use plyometrics to help train muscles for acceleration too, if these are different exercises to MV at contact times or longer? Yes, Craig, you should. Yes, the contact times are longer, but they're still incredibly fast contact times. We'll do a lot of plyometric exercises from a actual squat position. Load up, explode out. We do one with the medicine balls where we try and replicate what's happening in the blocks. I'm not lucky. I don't have an indoor track, sort of where we can train every night. So we have to be a bit clever about things. And we basically get up into almost a start position with the hands off, medicine ball in the hands, load up, throw the medicine ball and actually chase after it, but really start thinking about the plyometric action, and just try and change slightly differently. But the whole working of the plyometric action, as we'll see as we go through into it, is all about strengthening foot is all about strengthening core, is all about being able to control as you're landing and being able to fire quickly back off. So it's things that even if you're doing basic plyometrics will very much apply to the starts anyway. Any more, Martin, or should we crack on? How do you integrate plyometrics with other strength training modalities, and how does this change throughout the training year? Probably a bit more detail than I'd wanted to go into, Wayne, but we do look at basically, if we've done a plyometric session, I wouldn't do strength afterwards. We do look at bringing some basic plyos into the weights room. So after we've done a lift, we may do some plyometrics just to try and get the fast twitch fibers refiring. Weights wise, tends to mix the two together, and as the season starts, we tend to drop down the weights, increase the reps. Girls and boys males and females are different on that. Women you would take closer to competition period. They don't retain the strength as well. And plyometrics, we tend to drop off some of the heavier plyometrics and keep it low and fast. I'll talk about how I do sort of plyometrics, but you know, I'm probably on the cautious side of plyos. Something we'll have a look at as we go through, but we'll have a look at how you can progress things, but how you also drop them back. And really, we drop them back quite a lot during the summer, just to avoid neurally absolutely ruining the athlete. So we do drop it back. So back to the presentation. So what is a plyometric movement? Basically, you should try to replicate, and this is eventually, as I'll discuss as we go through, you don't try and replicate the event of day one with a junior athlete. It's something that you build up to, and the power is created. The movement that you will be expecting an athlete to undertake. Speed of contact is the key, keeping ground contact time to a minimum. Not height generation isn't the aim of plyometrics. Height generation is something that comes from it, but the speed of the contact is far more important than height generation. It's basically, I talk to the athletes, it's free energy. When you're sprinting, if you apply force in the correct direction, you're able to control that force. You're able to absorb that force up the Achilles, through the calf, through the hamstring, through the glutes. You're able to actually take that energy, absorb it, and get that back off the track. But it has to be a quick reaction. It's something we'll look at. It can't be a long hold, because then that stretch reflex action is lost, and it's something that doesn't happen. So it's actually free energy we talk about. I say to them, look, you know, we do this, it's free energy back to you. So why wouldn't we want to do it? We talk about contact times. If I can reduce an athlete, we've done some testing with some of the athletes just below sort of junior international level and junior international level. We've looked at those contact times and we've talked to them, and they're about 0.12, 0.13 of a second, which you think, well, that's fast. It's not as fast, it's not as fast as 0.08. But we talk to them and say, 1/100th of a second in a 100 meters race, if you take 40 steps, is 0.4 of a second. Plus, if you're reducing that contact time, you're actually maximizing more power back off the track. So you've got two benefits from it. And we really talk about the importance of actually, how important this is to get correct. And I talk about small gains being done regularly make massive improvements. Look at the small stuff. Do it really, really well. Do it properly. Again, something we'll have a look at, how you do things properly. Do it absolutely perfectly, and everything else will come around it. Don't worry about the bigger picture. Worry about the small stuff. Let's get that right, and everything else picks up. Don't forget, when an athlete's sprinting, that 0.08 of the contact time, and we'll have a look at a video in a minute, and you'll see the power that's created. there is something like 6.5 times in world-class sprinters their body weight going through a single foot at that stage. There's no way we can replicate that in a weights room. We wanted to do a squat with 6.5 times a single leg squat with 5.5 times your weight through your back. There's absolutely no way they'd look at that. You know, we wanted to do a double leg squat with 13 times the weight through you on your back. You know, there's very little ways you can replicate this, rather than actually thinking about how you do things and actually how you introduce it. And those are the kinds of forces the athletes, when they're sprinting, are having to actually control, synthesize, put back into the body to get back out of the track. So to me, for them to understand that is absolutely key. The small stuff, the control, the stuff that we do is absolutely key to their long-term success as an athlete and them not being broken. Again, something we'll have a look at. So just as a break, I gave you a hint of it earlier. Plyometrics is not this. Just as a bit of an aside, it isn't this. Just look at the contacts. Look at how long they actually contact the ground. That is all I will show you. The contact times are huge. As you can see, that is not a plyometric movement. That is how much power can you apply to get height and bring your knees up to your ears. That is not a plain sprinting action. That may have a place for high jump, where the last contact is a longer contact and they're coming up, but for sprinters, that to me doesn't have a place, and that isn't plyometric movement. Plyometric movement is all about speed of contact. So if we have a look at the second video, which, as this slide says, is plyometric movement. Those of you who have watched some of the webinars with me before will get a good idea about how much I love this video. Dyron Robles in the 110 high hurdles, having some analysis done on him. I'll play it in normal speed first. Just try and look at the foot contacts, how fast they are, and the force and speed that's generated. Then we'll have a look at it in slow motion and just look at what happens as he comes down, how much force he's able to control coming off the hurdle and get straight back into his running without collapsing.
Muy bien.
Muy bien. And then we'll have a look at that in slow motion. I'll try and fast forward it a bit and just get it up to some of the key action points as he comes off. Have a look as he comes off this hurdle, exactly what you see at that touchdown. The force he actually controls, doesn't collapse, and that you can drive off and drive off. Again, I wouldn't be teaching an athlete to do plyometrics at the start. This is a world-class athlete who's got amazing strength for the core, amazing strength for the feet. And it's something that, you know, ultimately you'll be looking at and trying to progress to. And eventually you'll be looking at where does he go, how does he go, and, you know, where you can go. But this is world class. You know, it's just to give you an idea of what a plyometric movement looks like. I wouldn't be expecting one of our athletes to do that at this stage. Back to the presentation. So, safety of plyometrics, body weight is generally used, as I said, something like 6.5 times. No video in slow-mo, somebody was saying. I don't know whether anybody else could see that. I'd play it. Body weight, if not, I'll send that video out. If you send me your email address at the end, if you didn't get it, I'll send that video out with all the other things as well. So I'll pop that video out to you as well. Body weight is generally used. We can create massive amounts of force with just simple body weight. We don't need to add weights. If you start to add weights on when you're producing those kinds of forces, it's really changing that center of mass. It's changing the way the athlete works. It's increasing that load massively, and I just wouldn't go there. We can produce more than enough force with just simple body weights, with some boxes, with everything else as we progress. So wouldn't really go there. Athletes should wear proper trainers, and I mean, it winds me up. They come down, they're untied. They could slip them on, slip them off. There's no actual protection there for their ankles. So yeah, athletes wear proper trainers. We don't do anything more than basic barefoot work, and we'll have a look at some of that a bit later. But we wouldn't go into full any kind of full bounding, any kind of full work with anything other than a really good pair of trainers well tied on. But we will have a look at some barefoot work later, why that works and where it applies into the plyometric training. Landing surface should be forgiving but not too soft. Use a surface with good traction, especially if you're performing movements horizontally. And something we'll have a look at again, monitor the number of contacts the athletes make. We'll have a look at a rough idea of numbers of contacts, but obviously the more depth they're doing, the more high velocity stuff they're doing, the less contacts you do. So we'll pick that up and have a look at that. Initially, focus on technical proficiency. I just can't stress that enough. Incorrect movements and imbalances will, if you do plyos, lead to injury. Absolutely no doubt about it. I blame probably the main reason, me being a coach today and not an athlete for a lot longer than I actually was, on the fact that I lifted incorrectly. We didn't have we had a coach, but we didn't have a coach working with us on this. We just went off and did stuff. We were doing stupid amounts of plyos, way too high, with no technical knowledge, no preparation on them. I've now got a back that's completely and utterly knackered, knees that hurt when I get up. I don't want an athlete to look back in 10, 15 years time and wish they'd never ever coached with me. So really try and get technique first. Something that, you know, you'll find a stress all the way through this. Technique before we progress them. Keep stressing and checking proper movement. Things change. Keep checking that they're moving right. Keep checking that everything's working. And, you know, we'll have a look. If you've got to regress, got to go back. Land with a full foot placement. As you saw Darren Robles earlier, his foot contact was through the toe. He's been doing this for years, but for athletes starting off, even more senior athletes, land with a full foot placement. I'll discuss that, why that is. Slightly towards the ball of the foot, but neither on the heels with the toes off or on the toes with the heel off for plyometrics. That type of landing will if you land with the heel down or your toes down, that will transfer for a lot more force up through the ankle, knee and hip joints. It won't allow the muscles to actually start to take some of that, some of the force that comes through them. It will transfer all the way through the joints. So if you're in that right position and able to react off, it will transfer more of the force through the muscles and therefore protect your athletes. Once mastered, the landing contacts should be fast. Again, we'll look at how we start athletes off on the contacts, but once they've mastered them, contact should be fast. If you hear that long slapping sound, it indicates that the landing is incorrect. I don't know what it's been around like where everyone else is, but I see people running past my house and I hear as they come past, and I just want to walk out and just say, look, can I help you? And you just see the forces that are going through. It's the same with the athletes. If you hear that, you know there's something wrong. Have a look at it, take it back. If you need to video, look at why they're doing what they're doing and how they're doing it. The core should be engaged and elongated in order to ensure proper projection of the centre of mass. It's something we do a lot on, core engagement through movement. It's a separate topic altogether that we could do. We touched on it on the training at home that was done. But really, you know, make sure your athlete's core strong. They can engage it, elongate the body, and hold that position. It avoids massive pressure on the lower spine. It's one of the big problems I see is back problems with the athletes at the moment. They spend too much time without the core engaged, playing on the Xbox, slouching, not sitting correctly. And again, it's something I lecture the athletes about till I go blue in the face, is about them sitting properly, engaging the core properly, actually thinking about how they walk, how they sit, how they move, and trying to really correct that. You need the stability through the spine, hips, knee, ankles, and feet, something we'll look at. If there are any imbalances, don't progress beyond the technical teaching and stability work. Take it back, technical teach, stability. You'll soon see by twisting, by dropping, by movement, if you look at an athlete doing something, look at it from the side, look at it from the front, look at it from the back, you will see different things happen. If you're not sure what you're seeing, best app I can recommend is Huddle, HUDL technique. It's free to download. You can download on that and you can actually watch it frame by frame over 120ths of a second. Some of the videos I show you a bit later, we've actually dropped, it's one of the junior athletes in with some of the senior athletes, just so you can see the difference, see where potential problems are, see the difference in movement, and you know, see it, try and do that. So she is very, very new. It was her first ever session that she'd come down and actually joined in with our squad. So you know, so very brave of her to let me show the videos as well. So but yeah, you'll see the differences, and you'll see those imbalances, and you'll see what happens and comes out of it. Progression, do not be in a hurry to progress. I said I keep repeating this. Athletes always want to see how high they can jump, see what height they can jump from and jump off. It's not plyometrics. It's okay, yeah, jump up for a bit of fun, see how they can get up. And we occasionally do that as a bit of a competition at the end, but it's not plyometric movement. It's a strength-based thing, and we do it totally as a bit of fun sometimes, but I would never ever do depth jumps coming off something down for fun. That's a big no-no. We'll sometimes see if you go up, and especially with the boxes I've got are foam boxes, so if they don't make it, they're not going to injure themselves. Double leg work preferable to single leg work at the very start. It's something we'll look at. Start double legged, progress to single legged. I do a lot of work with disability athletes, CP, amputee, and cerebral palsy and amputee, and various other athletes. And we progress quite quickly to single leg work because that's where we need to challenge. But double leg work is very much preferable at the start. Progression, start teaching the landing. Jumps should be submaximal, so you're not trying to make them jump from a height. You're not trying to make them jump a long way. All you're trying to do is very submaximal jumps with emphasis on the sticking and the landing. It's a video. I'll show you a video in a minute. So we emphasize ours is coming over mini hurdles with one of the more senior athletes. And even with the senior athletes, they do this virtually every session, is sticking and landing as part of the warm-up just to prepare them. The older they get, they'll go on to hopping and landing, then they'll do hopping from side to side and land it and stick. And it's part of our warm-up is actually to emphasize that sticking, landing quietly, absorbing with a slight bend of the knee, ankle, knee and hip. So very, very slight, but then sticking as soon as they possibly can and holding that position, because that's actually starting to get them to engage the core, thinking about actually control of the foot, thinking control of the ankle. And you'll soon see there's a video of a single leg hop and stick, and you'll see the instabilities that come in on that very quickly. Progress from double foot landing to a submaximal single leg hop and stick. And you might be on single leg hop and stick for a while. But, you know, it's a superb exercise. Junior athletes, really, really good to bring in. It's really teaching them to actually how to control. And you'll see them, they'll collapse, and you can talk to them about, well, where did the collapse come from? And it, you know, it'll tend to be the core, the hips. And you can say, well, if it goes from the hips, where were your hips to allow that collapse to happen? So where do you think your hips need to be? And you can talk to them about hip alignment, getting the hip stabilization, then extending the core. And the next one they can do, they feel a lot more stable. And it's a really quick win as a coach to then say, Paul Smith, how about a demo from you, Graham? I try not to read these, and that's the reason why. One day, Paul. And I really try and get them to buy into this, and it's a really quick win to get them to say, yeah, I can feel that's a lot more stable and a lot better, and I'm actually really able to control that. From that, progress to stabilization, jumps as above, but on landing hold for 5 seconds. Progress to perhaps up on a box and stick, and the box is no more than knee height. And we aim to come up onto the box and down, land and stick it, rather than trying to shuffle the feet forwards onto the box or throw the feet forward. So it's a real up, down onto the box and stick. A couple of videos for you, just demonstrating some of that. I've got athletes to demonstrate for me, Paul. So this is Joshua, just doing a double foot and stick. Trying to stick it, so you can see flat foot, landing, stick it. There's some arch in his back. It's something we'd be trying to work out. He's keeping those hips a bit more engaged and a bit less arch, but not a bad demonstration, just to show some stick stuff. And slight bend of the knees as he lands and as he comes down. We then go into the hop and stick, and you'll start to see some of the imbalances on this, and start to see the difficulty in controlling it and the wobble, the land, and having to really think about engaging the core. You're not going to cause any major damage doing this. You're not going to cause any major injuries. They're able to control it and get it back really quickly, but it's a really good way for them to start to think about how to control, how to get the hips engaged, how to get the core tight, how to really control through the ankle, which then prepares them to go on for the plyometric movements later. So progression from the stick, teaching the stick, is in-place bounding movements. Anybody who has done anything with me will know I love these. I call these pogos. I've got a video that I took at the weekend showing the athletes moving forwards doing this, but our progression is on the spot, then moving forwards, and then the final one. From that, from the sort of pogos, and pogos are really straight-legged. It's all about that plyometric action, but just in a really controlled way, and we'll have a look at that. You can take it into tuck jumps, scissor jumps. A bit of a variation on the tuck jumps is the split pogos. Again, I've got a video of that. And it's all about the athlete being able to control. You're bringing more movement into it. They've got to be able to land without collapsing. If they do, we don't progress. We go back. We rerun that stability. We rerun the control. Get them thinking about the movement before we get them progressing onto this. It's the next step up. Again, you're not going to cause any massive injuries with this, but it's something that you really need to nail on very early days. So video 5 is the pogos going forward. So as I said, we'll do these on the spot and then we come forwards. So here, you know, you can get a good idea from that. It's really straight, ankles tight, foot cocked up, ready to hit the ground and react as quickly as they can back off to get the height. So we've got two sort of well-conditioned athletes. Jonathan, my son, who's getting there, improving rapidly. We've got another athlete who literally first time down doing a session with us. You'll be glad to see we were socially distancing 3 meters apart. We had 2 sessions going on. We had Lee taking one session with his group on that side and another group on this side. And you'll see here, just going forwards, really trying to react off the ground, working that movement, course tight, hips are engaged, and we'll take that into a run. Have a look at the end and just try and have a look at the difference in some of the movements. Look at the ability to not actually be able to project downwards, but projecting forwards, and thinking about, where the hips are and everything else. It's something as we go through into a couple of the others, you'll really start to see the difference on. Martin, I don't know whether you can pick up on the audio or sound and picture. I think a couple of people are having problems, and perhaps just drop an email in or drop a message into them. So next movement, video, I think it's 5. If not, forgive me. I will. No, it isn't. It's 6. This is a split pogos. So this is a lot more plyometric movements. It's like a tuck jump, but to me is a lot more sprint based. You'll start to see some of the actions here, some of the foot movements, and some of the control that goes on. So it's a real plyometric movement. Really trying to split, but then getting the bounding, getting the bounce, and getting the reaction off the track with a bit of a split in between. This has become one of my favourite drills. Pretty much do this every session. Drop it in on the vast majority of the sessions. So that was in place bounding movement and split pogos. Any questions apart from audio and video not working? Are there any questions to drop in yet, Martin? Hi, Brian. Glad to hear from you. How do I determine if an athlete is physical ready for plyometric work? The simple basic plyometrics everyone can do. The hopping, basic hopping, basic skipping with a skipping rope, sack races, hopscotch. I think that should be a basic part of every young athlete's training program. Because it starts to get them prepared, ready to introduce it. So basic, easy plyometrics, they're doing it from a really young age in the schoolyard. They're doing stuff, perhaps not as much as, they would have done back in our day, but which is why I think as, athletics coaches who work with younger athletes really have a responsibility to bring more of that into their training. Just to prepare them for the physicality of the movement. For the more advanced plyos that you've just seen, we work on the stick stuff, we work on the hop and stick. If they can do that and they are old enough, we then start to progress it. I wouldn't do full plyos with anybody below probably 15, 16, and only then if they are really able to control all the other stuff we'll look at going forward. So I look at it, the physically ready is when they can do the stuff that we're teaching in the first stage. They can move on to the second stage. When they can do that at the second stage, they can move on to the third stage. But, that will also depend on age, is when I move them up and down. I'll make sure that we move them according to what they can do and their age range and things like that. How many days is optimum for the, we'll pick up on that, Rachel, as we go through. How many days is optimum for the best physical gains? We'll actually have a look at that, have a look at how much rest you need to give them, what percentage you can give them. And it's something that we'll discuss a bit on one of the slides in a few minutes' time, if that's okay. Yeah, split pogos comes in with just about every session. I'm really keen to bring a small element of plyometric movement into virtually every session, and we'll do some small hurdle bounds, run over mini hurdles. We'll do the pogos and the split pogos just about every session. We'll discuss it a bit more later on, but it's the one thing out of everything I've changed is actually the amount of foot strengthening work we do and the amount of basic plyometric work we do as part of the overall session. So, to me, as you saw with Darren Robles, hurdling sprinting is a really, really plyometric action. If we are going to ready them for that plyometric action when they're going to be running, we need to get them to think about it. Even jogging, they're thinking about plyometrics, they're thinking about foot contacts, they're thinking about getting off the track quickly. They're not just jogging for the sake of jogging. So if we do a 100 jog or 50 jog up, 50 jog back as part of the warm up, it's a jog thinking about the contacts, where the hips are, where the core is. It's a basic plyometric movement. Running is plyometric. So yes, it forms probably a key part of just about every session we do. Pogos, how much you restrict the upper body swing? There shouldn't be any upper body swing. They can use the arms, but the whole reason for the pogos is it's really working on the contacts down and back off. I don't want to see any upper body swing. I really want to see that core extended. And as we said earlier, that's one of the keys for plyometrics, is being able to extend the core, control the core, and be able to hit the ground, react off, and work off the track. Hips need to be engaged. I don't talk about hip stiffness because the hips need to be really free moving. We need those hip flexors to fire, and if you talk to the athletes about hip stiffness, they automatically start to cramp up and go. They don't think we talk about hip engagement, where the hips are, where the bum is compared to the body, and that needs to be tucked under. One of the easy ones people have heard me talk about is the Joel Elphinstone extension. So get them to push up with the hand as high as they can, the palm of the hand pushed down as low as they can, and then hold that position. And they've actually then started to get their hips into the correct position and started to elongate. So something we talk a lot about is actually minimizing that movement while they're doing the pogos, and that's why I quite like that exercise. Grass is good, or is better than track. We have to use grass at the moment. I would usually use the track just because we'll take that out into a run, and the track gives a better grip for the horizontal movement too. But if you haven't got access to a track and the younger athletes, grass is just fine because they're not going to create as much horizontal power as one of the senior athletes will. If I got, some of the athletes sprinting flat out that you saw there, and taking that into real flat out sprints on grass, chances are, it's not perfectly flat. We've also already had a couple of ankles go over and things on the grass and things like that. It's not perfectly flat. It's not perfect. So at the moment, we're tending to work on more of the contact stuff, the non-maximum velocity, thinking about speed and turnover. But younger athletes who can't create that much horizontal velocity and that much speed, grass will be just as good. Progression from that, short jumps to teach horizontal displacement. So very short jumps forwards. And that's basically teaching them to move the body forwards. So displacement to the center of gravity. Again, we talk a lot about the mechanics of running. It's something we touched on one of the previous webinars, was actually the direction of where the foot goes, how you produce force, how you produce power. And if they're doing short jumps, I still get them to think about bringing the foot backwards on the landing. If your athlete's moving forwards, the laws of physics say the foot has to come back at the speed or more that they're moving forwards to minimize braking forces. Then from a plyometric point of view, it needs to apply force downwards. But initially, this is all about forwards and stick, but I still get them to think about forwards, bring the foot back and stick it, rather than forwards and fall onto the foot, if that makes sense, just to prepare them for the next phases where you might get some easy bounding stuff. So it's forwards, bound, forwards, bound, forwards, bound and stick. So I will always talk to them about not letting the feet get away from them, the feet being tight, coming back underneath them, sticking underneath them before they go forwards. So we start with just one jump and stick it, and then we might take some consecutive long jumps, do 3 or 5, stick it at the end, perhaps do the same going upstairs, so do 3 stairs, stick at the end, 5 stairs, stick at the end. Remember, slight bend on the knees, flat foot, really try and stabilize. You might see the back arch, and you can soon start to pick out things that you can perhaps correct on them. From that, progressing on to a single leg hop, emphasize the action to be a single leg run. So similar to what I was talking about, the foot has to come back on a run. Similar to the hop, it's not a hop and let the foot get away from you and land heavily. It's a hop, the foot comes back and it's fast contact into the next one. So the foot has to come back, because if the foot doesn't come back, it's in front of the center of gravity and we're getting massive forces and braking forces through that. So the foot needs to come back to get underneath the center of mass in order to transfer them forwards. And again, we'll look at that and talk about that as we go through. Progression from that, long jumps adding more horizontal velocity, so then we're trying to take them further. Again, if you start to see collapsing on here, take it back, reduce it, take it back. Don't start getting thinking about distance, bring it back in. One of the worst bits of coaching I have seen, and I will not tell you where it is or who it was a coach who was doing a single leg sort of hopping with an athlete. He was marking out, and then he was doing single leg bounds. He was marking out each time where the athlete was getting. And I was saying the athlete was reaching for it. I was seeing massive collapsing of the knees, collapsing of the hips. And then he was saying to the athlete, right, next time I want you to get it further. You're already seeing massive problems. You're already seeing the knee collapsing, the hip collapsing. You know, there's massive forces going through those knees, you know, and when it collapses outwards, there's huge lateral forces going through that. You know, just a short way to actually injure an athlete. So if you see that, don't be afraid to say, right, let's just take it a step back. If you've got to explain to them why, explain to them why. Let's take it a step back. Let's just work on it. Think about where you're working, how you stabilize, how you do things before we progress again. Or don't be afraid to just move them back a bit. From that, teaching alternate leg bounding combinations of hops and bounds. So you're almost bringing a triple jump into it. So different hops, different bounds, hop, hop, bound, bound, hop, bound, jump, stick it. You can do everything with this. But probably 10 to 20 contacts maximum through this phase for younger athletes while they're learning. And combine these, you know, that's just for this element. You combine that with some of the earlier stuff and perhaps do a bit more of the earlier stuff and combine this with some of the later stuff for athletes who are starting to advance. And as I said, if an athlete struggles, revert to the other steps. Remember, look at foot stability, ankle, hips, knees, backs. Look from different angles. If you need to video, and you'll actually start to pick stuff out and see what you get. Barefoot exercises, even though we expect athletes to do plyometrics with shoes on, an element of barefoot work could help them to stabilize. I put quite a lot of the barefoot stuff into the file that I'll send out to everybody. Should start with walking exercises like walking high on the toes, then perhaps down onto the heel, up onto the toe, and then with the other foot, as you're up on the toe, down onto the heel, up onto the toe, down onto the heel, up onto the toe, walking along like that. Just basic foot strengthening stuff. You can get massive progressions with this, but this is very low impact exercises. I wouldn't expect the athletes to do anything more than what I'll show you without shoes on. So preferably in sand because it gives that instability, or if not, on grass. And the video I'll show you is as far as I would expect athletes to go. You'll see the younger athlete and you'll really see her start to struggle with this sort of stuff. And you'll really start to see some of the collapsing and things like that compared to some of the others. So if we look here, I will try and pause this specific area. I was going through it with Martin earlier and found a really good point to pause it on where you could really see what some of the issues were here. So just little barefoot stuff, double foot hops and bounds, different directions coming through. And I'll see if I can just pause this so we can perhaps see some of the issues. Even there, we can see some coming sideways with Harry. We can see a bit of knee twisting, tiny little bit of knee twisting, but we can see massive braking forces. I don't know whether you can see my cursor on here. You can see massive braking forces. You can see the hips twisting. You can see the hips coming back, the knees starting to break and buckle. I wouldn't be doing this. I'd be doing a lot low-level impact stuff, but it starts to give you an idea about the difference between the athletes. And then if we go on to video 8, this is just some single leg bounding a stick. And you'll see some real issues here starting to happen. See lots of collapsing through the back, unable to actually get that plyometric action, work the toes, foot's not strong enough yet. You're seeing braking coming out to the side. You see lots of issues through there. So I would revert back to doing that. But for barefoot work, that is as much as we do and as far as we go and as high as we go. And that's something that, as I said earlier, I'm trying to bring a lot more into the training program at the moment, is the barefoot stuff. It was going to be something I was going to introduce this winter, but in the current situation and where we are, I've decided that, you know, having discussed it with the athletes, I would bring it in a bit earlier. The length we'll look at, the higher the quality, the less the quantity. At the least, we probably look at about 20 contacts, and you may look at more than that, and it's something we'll have a look at. I only look at a maximum of one proper plyo session a week. It takes 2 to 3 days to recover, but we have elements of plyometrics in absolutely just about, I think, every session we do, barring the winter stuff where we'll perhaps, you know, go and run on sand dunes or anything else. So we keep a really good strong base of it, and we'll try and do one really good element of plyos within a session, or within a week, and then other elements we dropped in. So if you work on the basis of, if they're going flat out for sprinting, if they've got a race, that's a plyometric session. So, you know, that's one plyometric session. So, you know, you've then got to give it 2-3 days, and then you're perhaps into, you know, you're into your next week's program. So if you're at maximum velocity running, if you're coming into the summer, that's where we start to drop it back, because neurally you can't keep hitting them with really high stuff. You've occasionally got to just drop it back and drop some technical stuff in, rather than keep hitting them with the really hard stuff. Oh, good God, yes. Why not? Again, if they can do stuff and they can progress, absolutely, why not? You know, starting off at the basics, build it up. I've got a masters athlete that trains with me, and Chris does absolutely everything that the rest of them do. He may have to have slightly longer breaks, and he knows his body. He's been with us for a few years now. Chris knows his body. He knows what he can and can't do, and he you know, he works within that limit. And I think Siobhan's put a follow-up. Endurance runners, some of the information I will send you out is specific to endurance. If you work on this plyometric action, if you get them thinking about where the foot's traveling, that it comes back rather than falling onto it, if you think them about that foot being tight and the reaction off the ground, you can get massive gains, even over 5-10Ks, 10Ks, whatever. Had one of the mums join us, one of the older mums join us within, I can't remember how long it was, but within certainly between 4 and 6 months, she'd knocked 5 minutes off a 5K time. And it wasn't just training with us, it was thinking more technically about how she was running, the reactions off the ground, the fact that the reactions were faster. It wasn't a long slog, it was nice and light, and it was faster running, but lighter running. So absolutely key for everybody, but just started off gradually, build it up rather than throwing in the hard stuff early doors. You will hurt them, and it will take them longer to recover as well. Yeah, it is, Rachel. Sprinting is the best form of plyo workout, but what Plyometrics does, and again, if you're really interested in this stuff, some of the research documents that I'll send you out actually look at how Plyometrics, because it's such a small synthesized part of sprinting, because you're really only working on that contact element, how it really starts to train the muscles to react, how it starts to get the spindles to work, how it gets the central nervous system to start firing. So yes, sprinting is plyometrics, but plyometrics is almost like a drill. It's a very small part of the sprinting action. I don't think I'd quite realised until the last few years what an absolute key part it is, and I'll show you a video right at the end, but actually how important that contact with the ground and the reaction off the ground is to actually maximise force output. So it's a drill. Plyometrics is a small part of the sprinting action, broken down, worked on in a really technically correct way in order to maximise what we get as sprinting. So it's a breakdown of the running action. It's a small part, but it is a drill that it is really worth teaching your athletes. I haven't done, and no, I don't think I would. Hills, weights are quite tiring. Plyometrics is something really to do when the athlete is fresh. If we do weights, we might do a few very small bounds, but I wouldn't do lots of plyometrics. If it's a full hill session, they will be bounding up the ground, and it might be worth talking to them about the contacts, how they work off the ground, how they come through and working off. But if it's a tough hill session, if you're working hills, and it's a nice easy session, you're thinking about plyometric movement, then maybe. If it's a tough hill session and they're knackered, no, I wouldn't, because neurally, plyometrics puts so much emphasis on the system firing, them being able to control, them not collapse. It puts quite a lot of force through. If it's low-level plyometrics and it's part of the hill session, so if it's some of the hop and sticks and the hopping stuff, then yes, maybe I would, but I haven't done. But I wouldn't introduce anything more than some really low-level plyometrics into it. I would have that as a separate standalone session, or at the start of the hill session before you do the hills, to actually start to get them to think about, actually, I want my foot running up the hill to be able to do that, so that then again they can then put that into the hill race. But I wouldn't mix it with the hill session. It might go at the start, but I don't think I'd do hill runs and then plyos, hill runs then plyos. How do I clarify plyometrics intensity? I think I will answer that later. Classify plyometric intensity. Is that, Danita, type on the bottom if you could. Do you mean by that is how much they do, or where you put it for what age group? Can you just clarify that question at all? There'll be loads of people typing now. If you want to put that question at the end, Anita, and just perhaps clarify exactly what you mean by that, whether it's the number. If I've not answered it going through, if you want to, for the age group, right? For the age group, juniors, under 11s, under 13s, keep it at the basic skipping, sack races, hopping races, hopscotch, things like that. But teach them the fundamentals of landing, being able to control, being thinking about core, thinking about where the hips are. Once they get up to under 15s, we then start some of the more advanced stuff. We start to get them thinking about hopping and sticking, how they move forwards. Once they've gone through that phase, tends to be top age under 15s, under 17s, we might get them doing some of the more progressive bounding. And until they're probably under 20s, the top end stuff you'll see in a minute, I don't even touch unless, you know, they've been with me for a long time and I know that by doing it, I'm not going to injure them. I'm really, really careful about what we do and how we do it. Progression from that is shock jumps, and this, as Martin informed me, is what the Russians actually used to call plyometrics when they first started doing it, shock jumps. It really hits the high nervous system. The demands are very advanced. It's an advanced form of training, and it requires a really large training base. It requires the athlete to be really stable, foot strong, able to have massive amounts of control. It involves jumping down off boxes or rebounds over hurdles, possible straight legs over smaller heights, and bent legs over higher hurdles with at mid thigh or higher. It's something that is really quite advanced, put massive amount of force through them, massive amount of pain. And I really, really wouldn't introduce this until I was absolutely certain that the athlete is ready for it. Video 9 just shows you some of the straight leg shot jumps. These videos are taken from the European Hurdles Conference back a couple of years ago, and it just gives you, I'd like to have got some more of these done with perhaps my group, but it just gives you an idea about what I'm talking about straight leg. It gives you an idea about the plyometric movements and the actual forces that come into it. So it'll give you quite a good idea about some of the forces produced, seeing a good athlete with really with ankle stiffness, looking at how they can react off the ground and create quite massive amounts of height just with, really being able to hit the ground, control, absorb that force into the legs and react off really, really quickly. So it tends to be only as I said, the older athletes. I'll just play that again, just to give you an idea of the contacts. Again, I can send these videos out. There you go. Yeah, it was, I think, one of the German coaches who Gasper's just sort of picking up on it. High jumper, and I think it was one of the German national coaches who showed this video at the European Athletics Conference, Gasper. So yeah, well spotted. I think I've got some more in a minute. And then the final video, just giving you an idea of an athlete coming over a hurdle and over height, and giving you a real idea about the force creation. As I said, height isn't the purpose. Speed of contact is the purpose. But as they get better at that speed of contact and being able to control it, you can then introduce height. But height isn't the starting point of any of these exercises. It's the end point that is years and years into the making. And you can see the movement that's created. Really slow contact, fast absorption, contraction, and then eccentric movement back out. Gives you a really good idea about the types of forces that are created, but neurally, physiologically, there's massive amounts of forces going through the body on that. So as I said, I'll only do that with, you know, the older athletes that have been with me for a while and gone through the whole basis of everything. I just wanted to show you, you know, I know this is an introduction. I wanted to show you the end point, but you know, start at the beginning, work your way through, especially with young athletes, but try and work on it and work on it properly. Nearly finished, I promise you. So, caution, as I said, these exercises are not appropriate for juniors and beginner athletes. If you see collapse or wobble at any stage through the progression, go backwards. Work technique over height at all times, but once you get technique, you can perhaps start to introduce a bit of height. But that is, again, only with senior athletes. You don't need to go high. I go down to tracks and I see coaches trying to get athletes to go high over hurdles. It's not about the height created. It's the speed of that force and that contact in the ground. You don't need to go with under 15s, under 70s. You don't need to go anything above a mini hurdle. You get loads and loads of plyometric exercises just from that. Work technique over height. Do not try to push athletes beyond their limits, and don't let them allow you to let them push themselves beyond their limits either. The great ones for saying, actually, I want to have a go at that. No, you're not. Just take a step back. Earn the right to progress. Remember that, earn the right to progress. Any last questions? And then we'll just flick through a very quick summary and then we are finished. I think we hit that, Danita, didn't we? So running cadence, so turnover, yeah. There's only two things you can affect, Jonathan, in an athlete's speed: how far they go and the turnover. Again, there's if you look back at some of the other webinars, there's a webinar where we've looked at maximum velocity mechanics and things. If an athlete is running at top speed, if you get up to a world-class athlete, even close to a world-class athlete, pretty much the distance they cover on one stride is fairly similar. There's not much difference between it. So what you're then really working on is that cadence and that turnover. I talk massively about this. If an athlete puts the force in the right direction and inserts as much force into the ground as it possibly can, which is plyometrics, they will react off that track quicker. That foot will come off the ground quicker. They will cause more force, which actually then whips the foot round and back into the next one. If they don't think about the plyometric movement, they tend to fall onto the foot, collapse, and it's a massive long contact. Therefore, the stuff at the back ends up longer because they've collapsed, they've not got that speed, they've not got the speed of the turnover, they're not getting the force back off the track, and therefore the whole cadence changes. So it's something we talk a lot about, is actually, it is how they apply that force where, and you do start to find that really starts to increase the rapidity of the turnover of the athlete's legs. Good God, James, that's a long question. The very nature of plyometrics and core use results in length receptors shortening the range of motion and maximum effective movement and power output. To what extent will you advocate postural analysis, sports massage, and STR and posterior works to complement and derive maximum benefits? That's a bit more than an introduction to plyometrics, that one, mate. Yeah, obviously, stretching, release, fascia release, all of that falls hand in hand. The slower end stuff doesn't really apply. We're teaching them how to move, we're teaching them how to land, we're teaching them how to control themselves. But once they get up to doing that top end stuff, neurally, physiologically, it's really quite hard on them. So yeah, absolutely key. I've been impressed actually with the athletes I've got, is how much more mobile. We've just started back doing some easy grass training, but how much more mobile they've come back. And it was the one thing I sort of really hit home with them is during the lockdown is, you know, if you come back from this less flexible and less mobile, you know, I'll probably kill you, because if there's one time we've got to work on it, it's now, and they have done, and that needs to carry on. If we are going to push the boundaries of what we do, yes, you need stiffness and you need muscle stiffness, but that is very different. You know, the muscle, being able to control yourself as you're hitting is very different than muscle tightness. You still need that range of motion. Sprinters need a range of motion within a reason, and so we do get they do get sports massages. We do different kinds of cool downs depending on what the session's been, and we, you know, they are getting sort of quite regular fascia release and various other things just to try and keep that range of movement into it. Yeah, we'll come on to that, Simon. It is literally on the summary section, if that's okay. So we'll come on to the maximum number of foot contacts during a plyometric session right on the summary section in a minute. I just saw somebody saying they couldn't watch the videos. Dawn, just drop me an email. I will send you the videos through, so you'll see where they fit in. They're all labelled up. You'll be able to see where they fit in and where they are. And also, as Martin said, the video or the presentation and all the videos will be online in probably about 4 or 5 days' time, so you'll be able to pick up and see them on there. But if you drop me an email at the end of this, I'll send you the videos anyway, just so you can show the athletes and things. So to summarise, always start simple and progress complexity slowly. Warm up ready for the exercise. You know, if you're going to do high-end plyos, do some very low-end plyos. Warm up, get them thinking about the movement. Don't just drop them straight into it. Jogging 2 laps of the track and then dropping them into some top-end plyos ain't going to do much. Try and replicate. Think about the movement you want. You know, this isn't the answers. It's hopefully giving you more questions. Think about the movements you want to replicate and how you're going to do that. Always check for collapse or movement issues. Keep looking at your athletes. Don't just stand there chatting while they're doing it. It's absolutely key you watch them. Try and get them there and then to look at it. I'm a great one for videoing the athletes. Email me your video, email me your email addresses. I won't get them from this. So at the end, email me your email addresses. I'll give you my email address, email me them, and I'll create a big email to go out to everybody. Always check for collapse or movement issues and don't be afraid to regress. Athletes earn, you know, remember, athletes earn the right to progress. Keep the number of contacts low. So I hope this answers the earlier question. Keep the number of contacts low at the start. Build it up. Young athletes should have between 20 to 150 gram contacts maximum per session, with the upper end only on the low impact stuff, so skipping, easy hopping, things like that, not on the top end. You wouldn't expect 150 contacts at really top end stuff. 150 long bounding contacts, that's the short end stuff, and you might mix that with, you know, as they progress with, you know, low impact contacts and then introduce some high impact contacts, so the contacts increase. But I'd never expect 150 high impact contacts in a session at all. It will be a mix of the both. Maximal effort equals maximal recovery. So if you're doing, you know, if you're introducing, if you've got better athletes and introducing better stuff, give them more recovery time. Don't hit it too often. Athletes generally need, as we said earlier, 2 to 3 days to recover after a full plyometric session. Look to incorporate stability and strengthening work into your training program. Even for younger athletes, they need to know how to stabilize. Stability work, things like that, I'm starting to bring in at the end of the session. When they're knackered, then we're starting to get really try and challenge some of the stability issues and really get them to think about stabilizing when they're tired. But this again is for senior athletes. Sprinting, hurdling are plyometric exercises. How do we prepare our athletes to perform these? Remember, competitions are high intensity training sessions. Finally, more is not necessarily better. Better is better. Don't break your athletes. It's a great way to injure an athlete if progression isn't monitored. Never do whilst carrying a load. Speed of contact, if there's one thing you take out today, speed of contact is the absolute key, not how high they jump or how far they jump. Any final questions? If not, you know, if you want to email me after this, feel free. Rachel, there's enough force created whilst I'd rather go uphill running than downhill running. There's enough force created through a plyometric activity. The running downhill, you're putting even more force through that, and as you apply more force, you'll tend to find the athletes put the brakes on, the blocks on, and it's one thing I don't want. If it's a really shallow downhill, so 2-3 degrees, yes. If it's anything more than that, they're then starting to accelerate, especially older athletes, at a greater speed than they can control, and therefore you then start to get massive braking forces, potential of injury, everything else. So I tend to hold back from that. Any others? Yes, tends to be our plyo session is a Monday. Tuesday tends to be a easier track session, so the recover. With Thursday, the sort of more intense track session. That's the way I tend to set it up. Older athletes have even more than that. They'll drop in weight sessions, they'll drop in some easy bounding sessions, so an easy plyometric session at the weekend. We'll have extra training with them at the weekend, but that's the way we tend to set it up. So they get 3 days recovery before I'm really hitting them hard on a decent track session again. Brill. So just a quick plug, coming up are What Kind of Athlete Are You, hosted by Harry, which is next Wednesday. Harry does a hell of a lot of work working with people, mentoring people, and it's looking at what kind of athletes, you know, it's going to apply to the athletes this. What motivates them, what makes them tick, what actually is going to push them. And it's a really good way for starting to look at some of the, you know, how you deal with the individuals rather than the group. Wednesday after that is speed and bend running with Mike Leonard, how to run a bend, how to run a 2 bend, how that's actually done. And then you've got me again, unfortunately. If you've managed to stay awake, then you're welcome back again. Block starts, it will be a look at some block starts and some acceleration mechanics, perhaps a few ideas about how to set up blocks, which foot to put in, some of the training, different little training nuances I've introduced, some of the little cues, various other things that we'll have a look at. Also coming up are regional networking meetings. So these are spread across the southeast with Mike Leonard, north with me, southwest and Midlands with Martin, and southwest with Harry King. So the dates are there. This is limited to 20 coaches, and it's a chance for us as coaches to chat. It won't be us presenting. It will be us as 20 coaches chatting with each other. If you're interested in one of those, there's details on the England Athletics website. Please just email your coach lead for your area. The details are on the England Athletics website. Our details are on there as well. Please email us, drop us an email and express interest. And the first 20, we'll have a reserve list. We'll bring in, it's on Microsoft Teams, so everyone can see each other. We will just have a chat about various different things, and I'll share the topics ahead of, and I'm sure all of us will share the topics ahead of the catch up with you all. So finally, and there's more, just put the presentation back on, Martin. Have you taken me out? And there's more. If you want it, just email me, gpilkington@englandathletics.org. Drop me an email. As I said, Mike Leonard and Martin have provided me a whole host of information as well to share with you. So it's a collaboration between the 3 of us, and Shani's dropped some stuff in. So actually, sorry, collaboration between the 4 of us. So drop us an email. Actually, send me an email, because I don't get to see these until they come up in 4 or 5 days. So if you drop me an email, I'll send you an email out, and it'll have all the videos and loads and loads of extra stuff on. So all that remains is for me to say thank you for your time. Welcome Martin back in, and
Thank you, Graham. That was absolutely fantastic and so much information. I just say to everybody, if you can, email Graham. There's a big list of emails come through. That will take a little while to process. If you want it quicker, email him directly. And again, Graham, thank you. Fantastic. Went way beyond just a simple introduction. And yeah, and everybody, good evening. Thank you for attending and have a great rest of your evening.
Catch up with you all soon. Thank you very much.